Okay, so now we've learned how rocks can be weathered into pieces parts, which we call sediments. And then we've learned how the sediments can be eroded, how they can be separated from the parent rock and then transported. And so now we want to find out what's the fate of those sediments. So those sediments are going to be transported by some mechanism, and then they're going to come to rest. So the first picture is going to show what a river can do. And we're going to learn more about rivers in a future lesson. But for right now, let's talk about how a river can transport. So if the river is moving fast enough, it can transport the material. But as the river starts to slow down, so let's say that the river starts out moving very fast because it's moving downhill on a mountain, and now that river empties into another river that is moving slower horizontally. Well, as it moves slower and slower, it will not be able to hold on to its load. And so those sediments will then be deposited on the bottom of the river channel. Okay, likewise, we talked about in the previous segment about glaciers, and as long as it's cold, the glacier is going to be moving downhill just like a river, and it's going to be freezing onto debris, and it's going to be holding that debris inside the glacier. But just like a river can slow down when it gets into more level topography, a glacier can slow down if the temperature begins to warm up. And so then what happens is, just like the river drops its load, the glacier is going to drop its load as it begins to melt and then go back up the valley. The next one is going to be wind. So as long as the wind is blowing hard enough, it can transport sediments. But once the wind is no longer blowing, those sediments are going to drop out, and they're going to start to pile up and accumulate as sediment. Okay, what's the bottom picture? Okay, that's going to be a beach. And so you have sediments that have been transported to the beach, normally by a river or by wind. And then they accumulate on the beach. And then what can happen is wave action can redistribute all of those grains of sand, so that you can end up with sand dunes as a result of that. But again, if the energy of the particular environment decreases, then those sediments are going to settle out. The last picture shows what's happening in deep water. So in deep water, again, where the energy is very low, the water can no longer hold the mud and other debris, and it slowly begins to settle on the bottom of the ocean floor. So all of those are places where sediment can be deposited. Okay, what's going to happen next? So in our next segment, we're going to talk about lithification.